I'm Quint,
I'm Aron.
and we're Quent
Together,
and
we're
Aron.
Quent and Aron. Literally 5 seconds into it, and we can't keep it together. Worst podcast.
Oh man,
We write books.
we do. We write a series of action-adventure books about a band of misfit ex-soldiers that wind up in the crosshairs of the government. And there's
Sort of X, sort of current, kind of not, kind of plausible deniability, kind of intrigue, mystery, a little bit of romance, a lot of comedy. Much like us.
lots of comedy, yes.
Often unintentional.
At tonight's topic, we were going to talk about writer's block, which has struck all of us who have ever tried to put words to paper.
Our
But,
computer screen.
yes, if you don't live in the analog world. But our
Don't be judgy.
particular brand of writer's block is a little bit different just because we approach writing in a little bit different of a fashion. And that is the fact that we co-write. And so
A
we
lot
go into
of a different
things.
fashion.
Yeah, so as co-writers, we have a set world and a set group of characters, and we assume these characters based on what the scene needs. So if it's a Cruiser Emery scene, then I'm going to take the role of Cruiser, and Aaron's going to take the role of Emery. Or if it's a Chance Fletcher scene, I'm going to take the
Emery's
role of
scene would start like
Chance.
this.
And Aaron would take the role of Fletcher, and whoever's point of view the scene is going to be in winds up setting the scene. We generally have a pretty decent idea of what needs to happen, like outcome-wise, what we're moving towards, and generally there's a pretty good idea of what the setting's going to be, what their mood is, just like what the characters are going through, the backstory, because they're well-developed characters. We have a lot of character agency already figured out. And from there, we generally have an idea of what we want them to do or expect them to do, and then they refuse to play and do what we want. And that is our form of writer's block.
Or, for those of us who aren't super geniuses like Quinn, basically we role play. We, much like Dungeons and Dragons back in the day, for those of you old enough to remember that, certainly not me. It's me. We have made these characters, developed them, done in-depth backgrounds, histories. We know them inside and out. And we have created an overall story arc that starts with the first book and goes all the way to the end. And within each story arc, we have these books. And within each book are these scenes that we break down, and we know character A needs to do this so we can get to point B. And then they never play along. They just totally get to a point, and they refuse to actually do what we need them to do. Or they do something completely opposite of what we're expecting, and then the two of us end up like, no, you totally did this wrong. Your character's a jerk. Cruiser is a big fat jerk, and he shouldn't have done that. And Quinn will be like, well, he is a jerk. True. But he absolutely needed to do that. And then it becomes a matter of us trying to figure out why. Well, at this point, we try to figure out why. For the first couple years, we just had to go to separate corners into our Better Choices chairs and take some time out. And eventually, I think it became clear that when we hit those scenes, what we really had was, I don't think lazy writing is quite the right term, but we had writing that wasn't actually true to the character. And it sometimes wasn't even intentional. It just kind of happened that we didn't get to that point yet to find out why the character was doing what they were doing.
Yeah, it's like a hidden, undeveloped aspect of the character, that there's some kind of motivation in the character that they're unwilling to cooperate with what we're doing. And so the character is taking over, and it's much more true to them. But we're still in the dark because we haven't quite figured out that part of the character. And generally, when we get it resolved, everything kind of falls into place, and we're like, oh, that's what we were missing.
Now I get it.
Yeah.
But, at that point, we've kind of like clawed and scratched and bitten and huffed and stomped and did a little huff and
Name
puff.
called
What
and
you to do what I want you to do. Why is it so hard? I never do that. I do that. I think that Wolf Emery scene in what we're currently calling, what are we calling that book now? Devil?
The Devil and Sirocco.
It just rocked our world because it was absolutely nothing like it was supposed to be. Wolf, who is the leader, would never, ever, ever compromise the mission. He would never compromise his men. That much we knew about him. However, when we played that scene, you were absolutely insistent that this is what he was going to do. And it literally took us 3, maybe 4 years to figure out why. It just went right the hell off the rails, off the weeds, into the ditch. It rolled over, it caught fire. And then at night, the ice weasels came. It was so bad. We just could not figure out why this scene would not work, because clearly Wolf would not do this. Wolf would not freaking sacrifice the team and the mission because a girl was crying. That would never happen.
It's a little bit more than crying. She was crying, and she had been missing for forever, and she was being incredibly elusive with her answers to very important questions. And that was unacceptable.
No, see, even then, based on the fact that he had interest in this woman, may have even had feelings for her, in that universe, in that time, he didn't have the bond with her that he had with his team. And I think everyone looking at Wolf as a character knows he is that, typical alpha male leader, silver fox guy where his men are always going to come first. So the fact that he just completely lost his mind and was like, no, screw the mission, screw everything, you're coming with me right now.
Right now.
That's it. I'm gonna punch everyone in the face and just be done with it. And we had knockdown, drag out, had to go to our own thinking chairs and think about the consequences of our actions for our imaginary characters for weeks with all the butthurt feelings before we could come back. And it eventually came to all right, Quid, we'll leave it like you say it has to be, but it makes no sense.
Yeah. And I think we wound up starting writing a different book because we couldn't deal with it. We couldn't come to solid agreeable terms on it. So we wound up dabbling in other stuff to work around it because we were still in separate corners.
So that scene ended up with us first we fought, then we gave up, then we wrote not just one, not two, but several different books, and then we came back to it. It still didn't make sense. And then we wrote a scene 2 weeks ago, and suddenly it became clear why that scene never felt right. Because we didn't understand Wolf and Emery at that point.
Years down the road, things finally fell together.
Yeah, and Wolf and Emery were always right in that scene. That scene always worked the way it was supposed to work. We just had not done the work to get to it. And I think that's where this whole idea of making characters do things because we need it for a plot point doesn't work. You really have to have the characters built, and you have to trust them. Even when they're complete assholes, and I'm talking to you, Cruiser.
everybody's talking to Cruiser at that point. Yeah, and I think the biggest problem with writing with a hard outline or plot points that you have to get to is that you become more centered on the plot and the story you're trying to tell rather than letting the characters tell the story that they need to tell. And that is where you get kind of pushed into a corner and you're at odds between story and character when it really needs to be like a healthy marriage of the two.
See, and I personally think stories have all been told. There's only so many plot points you have. Characters are like people. No one is the same. And what they do with those plot points and how they run with them and what they create out of them is what makes writing unique, different, fun, and wonderful. And as much as I hate when we get to those blocks where we literally have to go weeks and we cannot resolve it, and we have to think about it, and I have loved every damn scene that's come out of that. And I think the escape scene is like the primary example of that, because we fought tooth and nail.
Oh, yes, we did.
But there was no give going to happen, period, because it was not going to go like that. No. And then it really wasn't even my problem with it or your problem with it. It was that we had lost the essence of the team. We had lost the essence of who they were and what they were and how they would accomplish this. It wasn't the details, it was the character.
Yeah.
We lost the humor. We lost that complete irreverent, not even teenager, like this attitude.
Oh, it's cavalier and brazen disregard for consequence.
Well, I think that's Chance, but I think overall as the team, in the darkest of times, they are always going to have this sense of humor, this dark humor that so many first responders and military they have to deal with the things that they've seen. You kind of have to have that mindset, that attitude. And I think in that scene it really showed through, and that's what makes it so perfect. Even though we almost had to get divorced, even though we're not married or a couple. But it was this close. I'm taking the houseplants and you can have the cat. But we don't have a cat. Well, we'll get one. And then I will fight you for it.
So, but the one thing that we've always been really good at is, despite, how much of jerks and at odds each other, like the characters can be in a scene.
Okay, when you're saying jerks, it's really just Wolf and Cruiser.
Oh, no. They can all be assholes. Maybe the only exception to that is Dex.
No, Sam is not an asshole.
She's not like the core team, though. She's...
Emery's not an asshole.
Really?
Yeah, she has the emotional maturity of a 15-year-old turnip, but that has nothing to do with anything. She's not an asshole. She's just completely neurotic and broken. Very, very oh, my llama almost came out of the frame.
Absolutely broken. And I think that's actually another good point with characters is a lot of their motivations comes from their past. And if you don't know the past and you don't know their flaws, because they're all incredibly broken characters, and based on those neuroses, you get their reactions to things and how they handle things and how they view and interpret the world through their completely broken lens. And that's how they move through the world, and it's how they interpret everything that goes on. And because of that, you get your plot points. And that's how one scene turns into 3 scenes. And, there goes your writer's block. Like, I don't know how many times we've been like, we're not quite sure what's going on. Nothing's really screaming at us. But we do one scene and it turns into, okay, well now we're at the end of the scene and we know that Fletcher's going to go off and do this, which means that so-and-so has to go do this. And eventually we will corral them to the next plot point we really need them to meet at. But the route that they take to get there
We don't
is all
corral
them.
them. We do not corral them. We ride them to the end. You cannot corral them. I believe there's a scene with Wolf and a few women. The one saying, "Oh, I can control him," and Emery just laughing her ass off because you do not control Wolf.
Oh,
You are not involved with Wolf if you want to control him. You survive him.
corralling
him.
and controlling are two very different things.
You don't corral Wolf. Every once in a while, you have to put a hard stop to him, and you might have to tase him, hit him with a tranquilizer dart, or shoot him once or twice. 2 or 3. It's not an unhealthy relationship if you've actually shot him in the chest and the ass, given the context of their relationship. It's a little unhealthy. But I think that's what makes it so good, is it's human, it's relatable. They're not perfect. They
Oh,
are. Not a single one of them could survive without the others.
no, they're incredibly broken, but that's what makes them relatable, and it I think also makes them that's why the stories work.
That's why they're actually heroes, despite
Yep.
their best efforts to not be.
Yeah,
Not a single one of them goes into this wanting to be a hero.
no,
They go into
none
it
of them
because
want it.
there's an internal drive in all their broken little bits. It's what they have to do. And they found these people who are broken in just the right ways that fit with them. And out of that, you have made something better than the sum of the parts. And I think Wolf is very much aware of that. I don't know if the others are. Probably Dex is. Because
I'd give Dex that. I don't think the others are. I think Wolf very much realizes the craftsmanship kind of involved in that. He was
he
the
put
one
all
that
the
like
pieces
he
together.
did. He put them together because he saw the beauty and the genius within these broken pieces of people that had just been cast by the rest of the system into like the penal system and all of that.
And I don't think it's any coincidence that we are in frontline professions and have been and are always kind of drawn to these characters because they're sort of the people you see every day.
Yeah.
They're not real heroes. They're not real. They all have tremendous flaws and awful things that you have to see, smell, clean, and have sent to the lab for testing.
Yes.
They're capable, and they're so much more than what they look like on paper.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yep. And I think that's one of the big keys with getting past the writer's block is you develop the flaws. That's one of the biggest things. You develop the flaws of the characters, and then you listen to them. You let them take over. Have a drink and let them take over. And stop second guessing them.
Emery agrees.
Of course she does.
Well, because Emery would agree anyways and then go do whatever the fuck she wanted to do because agreeing is easier than fighting where she could lose. So, of course, darling, I am thrilled to do whatever you want, darling. I just need to go outside to my car and get a few things. I promise you I'll be back.
I'll be right back.
Zoom.
And Chance is going to try to get in on that. He's going to be like, I'm pretty sure it's heavy. I'm going to go lift things.
Already gone. Emery outside waiting with the keys. Chance like, why do we need keys?
I've hotwired these things since I was 6.
Hot wire. I have a screwdriver. It's on my keychain. But I think the real thing comes back to that whole fact that you know those characters so well, and you create them, and you know what they're going to do in a scene, and then they don't do it. And it's because no matter how well you know them, you don't.
Yeah.
Just like people, just like humans, they have nuances, subtleties, and secrets that they have yet to tell you. So when you get to that point and the scene doesn't work, do not force it. Don't be a Mary Sue. Don't take the easy way. Don't assume they just do it to get from point A to point B. Don't be like me in that scene that Tom, we had a beta reader, Tom, who I love, adore him. He read the scene and he goes, and why would Emery do that when it would be so much easier just to do this? And I'm like, Quint, why the hell would she do that? I really want to argue about this, but I kind of think maybe we really, yeah, I think I totally fucked that up. I really loved that scene. I thought it was really clever when I wrote it, but it makes no sense now.
Yeah, you can't be married to a scene.
No, but then we're like, oh shit, well, if that scene goes, then the entire way we paced out the book is gone, and now what do we fucking do? Listen to the characters.
Listen to the characters. It all worked out, and that scene is actually in the first book that we managed to finish, and it's in final edits right now before we start looking for querying an agent and going down that whole route. But it was literally because we listened to the characters and our editor, who pointed out that we were very stupid in overcomplicating things.
Good catch.
Yes.
Totally. I had overthought. So clever, so loved it. So, yeah, I'm like, oh, yeah, that was
so unnecessary. Yeah, I remember that specifically. And I was like, ooh, how's she going to take that? Because I know she worked really hard on that scene.
And I remember specifically getting that and being like, oh. Well, shit.
Yeah.
I got nothing.
Yep.
But I think that is, if you come into this game and you really want to write good stories, and you are here to tell stories, and if you really are invested in those characters, and you realize that your job as a writer is to tell the story the characters need you to tell, and not the story you want to force people to listen to, you'll never go wrong.